Hello, I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley.
And I'm her daughter, Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi and I want to welcome you to Open to Hope Conversations, the podcast.
We believe that the greatest gift you can give yourself after a loss is hope, using this moment to connect with others who have not only survived but thrived.
So let's get started. Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Heidi. We're going to have a great show today because we've got somebody from the Compassionate Friends on, but she's got quite a story, and we're going to talk about grief and life going together. You know, how do you celebrate when you've had a loss? How do you find joy again? So we'll be talking about that on the show, right, Heidi?
Absolutely, Mom. Like you said, we're going to talk about grief and life and how they go together. And we have a really interesting guest that knows a lot about this. Our guest today is Louise Strasenburgh. And in 2011, Louise's 26-year-old son was killed, and exactly 5 weeks later, her mother died unexpectedly as well. In between those two events, her daughter's wedding actually took place. Louise is a certified grief recovery specialist and co-leader of the Compassionate Friends in Boston. She was the co-leader there. She is the author of The Space in My Heart. Welcome to our podcast, Louise.
Thank you. I'm just thrilled to be here. It's lovely to see you.
It's great to have you on. Well, tell us a bit about the death of your son to begin with. I want to say your son passed away, and then, as Heidi said, your daughter got married, and then your mother passed away. I mean, we want to talk about how you deal with joy and the joy
Right.
of living while you're dealing with the tremendous loss of a son.
It was extraordinary. It was 5 weeks from beginning to end, from one death to another. It was only 5 weeks.
Wow.
Wow.
And my daughter's wedding was in the middle. And what was tricky was my son was killed in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and my daughter was getting married in Boston, and my mother died in London. So
Wow.
I was traveling across that Atlantic Ocean many times in 2011 to do memorial services and funerals.
How did your son die, Louise?
He was murdered, actually.
Oh, in Puerto Rico.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Wow, very
Yeah.
traumatic.
Very, very. Yeah. And the way that I heard about it, his brother, my other son, called me, pretty sure that had happened, but not exactly sure. But something had been on the news, and he sent me a video of the newscast, and that was what I was looking at. So,
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
My goodness.
yeah, it was very, and I was in London at that moment. So
Did they find out who did it? Who killed him?
no,
Who murdered him?
really,
No.
it went to a point of being with the FBI, and
Mhm.
but Puerto Rico is very rife with a lot of crime, and so when the police were speaking to us, they mentioned that it was just one of many incidents they'd had that day, that week. I mean, it was a constant.
And he was on vacation. Was he visiting, or did he
was
live
living there, actually. He was
Okay.
living there. I had lived there, and all my children were born there, actually. And
Oh,
he was
wow.
he was the youngest of my three.
Mm-hmm.
My husband at the time was working in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And so you didn't have a husband at that time to support you through it, or you did?
Exactly right. Yes, in fact, yes, I didn't have that support at all. There seemed to be blame coming my way, but you know what? Everybody was just very upset. So I felt that I handled it with the support of my daughter and my other son and my friends. So
tell us about the wedding. You had been planning it, I assume, helping your daughter plan it.
Well, interestingly enough, and thank goodness, as I was actually in England working on a project, my daughter was in Boston with her wife to be, Michelle, and they had decided to plan it themselves.
Okay.
And that was unbelievably helpful because, in fact, it came off, and all I had to do was show up.
And so Michelle was able to help your daughter also, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, she was. And it was just a time of traveling again.
Well,
You know, my daughter flew to the Caribbean as well in the beginning, and then we all went back to Boston, and then there was the wedding, and I was trying to figure out what do I wear, and at the same time I'm writing out my son's memorial
Wow.
passages, and it was insane.
I was
Really.
gonna say it must have been very strange. You had, buried a son and had that, and now you're at a wedding with, I'm
Yeah,
guessing, some of the same people, and you're celebrating, but you're also in an emotional space grieving as you're
I was.
celebrating.
People were so respectful of that. They
Mm-hmm.
just really kind of left me alone pretty much, and I
Yeah.
it was a beautiful occasion, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm, you know, they look lovely, and I spent the time that I needed to with them. We were just supporting each other. It was
That's
wonderful. And
great.
then from there, I had a call from my older brother to say, you better get back to London quickly because our mother is not doing well at all. And
Wow.
so I went the next day back to London, and she died 10 days later.
So tell us about
Mhm.
your journey.
I've done everything. My daughter's married. She's in Boston. I decide I need to be in Boston. And I was very excited because she was expecting a baby.
Ah,
Mm.
Pretty.
Nice.
So that was a tremendous focus. Um, so I came to Boston and I found an apartment and I got a job, and I have some very good friends there who are tremendously supportive. And I just continued, but I was searching for who else has lost a child. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually, a friend of mine told me about the Compassionate Friends. Had I heard of it? No, I'd never heard of it. Went to a meeting. It was a little bit out of town in not a very great spot. And I'm very much of a doer. If I see something that needs doing, I will try to do it. And the couple who were running it said, we're being relocated to North Carolina. And I'm like, okay, the conference is coming to Boston. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
train as a leader. I'm going to move this thing to the city center downtown
Wow.
because there have to be more people like me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Yeah.
who they are, but I'm going to find them. It was just the next year. I was like, I have to get help. I moved it to the biggest church, one of the biggest churches in Boston. They gave us a free space, city center. And this thing over the next 6 years just grew to the point where I had a siblings group and the parents and grandparents, and it was fabulous. And that was life saving.
Wow.
But in the meantime, my daughter in 2012, so just the next year, had this baby. And you talk about grief and life. And here I was at the hospital waiting, you know, outside the room. And this baby in this little bassinet, and it was life right there.
Mm-hmm.
And every day after that, he continued to live. You know, it was hard to explain, but it was like, I want the world to stop. Just everybody stop for a minute because I've had a lot going on. My mother, that just would everybody stop. No, this little baby is like, no, can't stop. Gotta keep going. And he honestly was part of my life-saving anchor.
Mm-hmm.
And I give him, not that he knew it at the time, but I give him credit for saying, look, here's life, and life does continue
Yeah.
even after these
Do you ever?
terrible issues. And he was so joyous and brought me such joy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was in between. He was a wonderful distraction, but he was also a living, breathing part of my family. And
Right.
it was someone to hold and love when I was missing that person that I
Well,
had.
and I love this, Louise, because like you said, as people leave our family, I mean, your son had left, your mother had left, they had died, a new person came in, a new life
Yes,
came in,
yes,
which is so amazing.
it was. Now, today he's 12 years old. He's
that's
Mm-hmm.
what
an
I was going
absolute
to say. I
hoot.
was thinking of how old he is.
We're very close. I'm going to see him for Thanksgiving. And I write to him every year a special letter on his birthday. And he really, I feel he saved part of my life, part of my heart.
Mm-hmm.
How do you
Mm-hmm.
remember Oliver?
Well, I remember Oliver's being very funny, and we would just giggle a lot. He was excellent at my children being American, of an American father born in Puerto Rico. They don't sound like me. And Oliver was particularly good at mimicking a British accent. You know, he got a big kick out of that. But he was very sweet. He was a very wanted baby, and he was 6 years younger than my other two. And I felt at that point I knew what I was doing, mothering wise. So I felt more confident with him, and we had a good time, and he was adorable.
You've seen a lot of people come to Compassionate Friends where there have been murders, I'm sure.
I certainly have.
And
And at the conference and through my grief specialist work, I went on after 5 years at TCF. I thought, you know, this is how I'm doing. I feel I'm helping people. They're helping me, which was the whole system. And then I decided to go a little bit further and get a specialist certificate, because I feel the work is so rewarding, and people they're so hesitant to talk about grief, but it's so part of life.
And I would think hesitant to talk about grief, and then even more hesitant to talk about murder.
Oh, totally stigmatized. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a stigmatized loss. Just the other day, a friend here, she said, well, I just heard about your son. I'm so sorry. How did he die? And I said, well, I'm so glad you asked, because part of my grief education is to say, every time you ask a parent that question, you're asking them to go back to that moment when they heard the news, when they envisioned what had happened, when they went back there. And I said, that's not really a helpful thing. But I'd love to tell you about my son while he was alive. And let's just say he died, you know, and leave it at that. And she was like, oh, yes, I hadn't thought about that. Da, 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 da.
I think there are two types of death I've seen where they're really tough. One is murder, and the other one is when somebody dies by suicide, or what's going on now with the drug deaths.
Overdose, yeah.
Know why they died.
Oh,
I mean, whether it's questionable, did they really take an overdose?
yes.
You know, and
Or was it an accidental overdose?
Yeah, and those three, what would you say to these people?
Everybody's loss is 100%. You know, it's everybody's loss in that room, in the TCF room. We would go around. I'd be in tears by the time we'd just done the intro and I was about to lead the group. And I would just have to take a moment, because everybody's loss so unique to them, 100% theirs, and not to be judged or analyzed or criticized, and nobody comparing, nothing worse, you know, no comparing. It's just mine is unique to me. And I would just say I wouldn't miss Oliver any less if he had had cancer for 9 months or something and then died and whatever.
Right. I mean,
The point is,
empty.
it's empty. I mean, he has gone, and how do I integrate that into my life going forward? My book is, well, I've written it for children.
Really,
it can go with anybody. It's about this man, Chip, and he adopts two Westies from the shelter. And it's the story, their brother and sister, and the brother dies. And it's how does the sister deal with the death, and how does Chip, the owner, deal with the death? And so it's a story about that, but it has a concluding ending that really sort of ties it up, so that even when we experience loss, which will bring grief, if we can put it in its place, we will make space in our hearts for other things that will come to us.
I love it. That is
yeah, me too.
beautiful, beautiful thought. Well, tell us how people can get in touch with you. Where can people get your book, The Space
They
in
can get it on Amazon. It's on all the Amazon platforms.
Well, thank you so much, Louise, for being on the show and for your spirit and your energy. And you so show that you will be happy again. You just got to hang in and get through these. It's can be a rough journey.
Yeah. And look for help, because it's there, you know, and go out and try to offer a little help. And it's funny, you know, it's very reciprocal. So it's good.
Yeah, I love that. It's reciprocal. And you got
Thank
a big
you so much for having me. I've loved talking with you both.
It's been fun.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you for being such an inspiration that you can find hope again after loss.
And
Indeed.
we want to thank everybody for being on this show today. And Heidi and I always want to remind you that if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you found your own, and God bless.
I'm Dr. Heidi Horsley. You have been listening to Open to Hope, the podcast. You can follow Open to Hope on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. To learn more, visit us at opentohope.com and go to Apple Podcasts to subscribe.
I'm Dr. Gloria Horsley. Join us again next week for another Open to Hope conversation, where we invite you to lean on our hope until you find your own.